Using resistance bands to improve your deadlift. Should you do it? Let's talk about it. All right, so let's talk about why you would use bands for your deadlift in the first place. So there are 3 reasons why I'll typically program resistance banded deadlift for myself and for my clients. So the first reason is for improving strength off of the floor. Starting the barbell's momentum off the floor is arguably the toughest part of the deadlift in my opinion, especially for most lifters and athletes that have trouble pulling the slack out of the bar or just maintaining good positioning as they start to get that barbell moving. A band is basically gonna try to trap you on the floor. So if you do struggle with your strength off the floor, a band could be a really useful tool to help you kind of like stay poised and in the pocket and fight through that positioning while maintaining good form. Because the band is going to get tighter and more tense as you start to lift, it can be a nice tool because if you use lighter weight, you'll have a little bit more of a means to lift that bar, get some momentum going, and then you'll have to fight through that band's tension. So you're not going to totally trap yourself on the floor because you're just lifting straight weight generally for like the first 10 to 20%, and then that band's tension is going to kick in. So it can be a really useful tool for helping you fight through that positioning if you struggle with strength off of the floor. The second reason is for improving overall power output when it comes to your pulling. So by using a lighter band and a lighter weight, you can focus on velocity focused pulls or speed pulls, and that's basically going to be a great tool because instead of using straight weight, that band's tension is going to have a little bit more of a variable resistance, so you can potentially help limit some of the fatigue that you might have if you're using straight weight for all of your speed pull sets. So by using lighter weight with a band, you're going to have more tension towards the top of the movement, but at the bottom of the movement, it's going to be relatively unloaded regarding the band's resistance. So it can be a great tool for helping you to produce more power and force through the floor as you're lifting because that band is going to be once again trying to trap you on the ground. But if you're trying to focus on force and speed and power, you can drive through that band's resistance to get a little bit more of a training adaptation for your goals. The third reason, and this is my favorite reason for using bands in my deadlift, is for fighting through sticking points. So if you typically get stuck around your knees or at lockout, a band can be a fantastic tool for really exposing your weaknesses and then making you work through them. So when you start to lift a deadlift with a resistance band, it's going to be toughest around that knee range of motion towards lockout. So basically, the higher that barbell gets, the tougher it's going to be to lift it. Now, if you are typically getting stuck in anywhere in that range of motion, basically using a band with a slightly lighter weight, it can be a really great tool to really like zero in and focus on the range of motion that you get stuck with. And if you want bonus points, you could even add a like 1 to 2 second pause, because let's say you get stuck generally around the knees, do a 1 to 2 second pause there, that band is going to be actively fighting you to the ground and like pulling you to the ground. If you can maintain position there and then fight that lockout, you're going to get a ton of carryover for working through your sticking points in your deadlift. So if you do find that you might be plateaued with your deadlift because of a very specific range of motion, it might be time to explore using some bands. So in general, there are 2 common ways to set up resistance bands for deadlifts. If you don't have a platform that has basically anchors on both sides of you, then you could use just a single band under the feet. Now, if you're going to anchor on both sides of you, I would suggest positioning the bands so they are close to the collar. That way they will not get in the way of your deadlift mechanics. Also, it'll be a little bit more level regarding the resistance on the bar. If you're off a little bit, you're likely gonna have the bar kind of like be a little bit out of sync as you're pulling. And then also when it comes to using those anchors, you want that barbell lined up in the center of the platform so you're getting right into the middle of the bands. Now, if you don't have the anchors, or if you only have a single band because you have 2 bands that are different resistances, you're gonna stand on that, put the band under the midfoot, and then you're either going to grip the band with your hands. So basically if you hook grip, you'll just hook grip with the band, or if you're using straps, you'll basically just strap up and hold onto the band as well, or you can put them over your wrist. Now, this is a new method that I don't typically use that often. However, I did see some lifters using it and I thought it was a pretty clever idea. You're gonna have a little bit of a different pull, but it does work the same as just gripping the barbell and the band. So if you find that uncomfortable or unbearable, or if you have just smaller hands, you can definitely put it on the wrist and get the same benefit. Now, one thing I will say is that if you're using a single band, make sure you're using a lighter band. If you're using a thicker band, you might find that it throws you out of balance because the tension might just be too high for what feels comfortable under your feet as you're deadlifting. So definitely take that into account. But either of those methods can be awesome when it comes to adding a resistance band to your deadlift. So when it comes to programming, for the 3 reasons I discussed earlier, if your issue is strength off the floor and that's why you're using resistance bands, I would suggest using a lighter band with a light to moderate load. That is generally going to be the best case scenario for helping you improve your strength off the floor without completely trapping you and demoralizing you, which I've done before when using too thick of bands or when going too heavy. So definitely stay in that like to light to moderate range regarding weight and use a light band. Now, if your goal is power and velocity, this is going to vary a lot basically on your goals and what you're trying to train for. But what I would suggest doing is keeping the bar weight lighter and varying your resistance band. So start with a lighter band if you're brand new to these, and then you get heavier with your band, but keep the bar weight lighter because the goal is moving fast, and that band's tension is gonna be, I think, the best variable resistance for you when you're trying to create more power output regarding your top and pulling strength. If your goal is working through sticking points, I would suggest using a light to moderate, even heavier load if you are a little bit more advanced with your lifting, and a light to moderate band. This is gonna vary a lot depending on where your sticking point is. So for example, if your sticking point is close to lockout, you might wanna use a lighter band because a moderate band might be too much. So a lighter band can be awesome if your sticking point is close to lockout. And if it's around that knee range of motion, a light to moderate band can be a really good call to help you get a nice bang for your buck. All right guys, that wraps up this video talking about resistance bands for deadlifts. If you have additional questions on using resistance bands for your deadlifts, drop a comment down below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And if you need some deadlift form help, definitely hit me up on Instagram. I don't mind giving some feedback here and there if you need any. But as always guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next one.